Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jai. Thank you, Tim. Professor Flint, Steve Pervinas, who I see face to face for the first time. Lovely to see you here, Steve. And could I commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of my wallet. My wife, Katerina, is here. And somebody with a lengthier acquaintance with me, and who I'm very proud to say influenced me tremendously growing up. My mother, Maureen, is here down the back. Mum, stand up, Mum. Mum, stand up. They tell me I have to speak for an hour. I used to get ad breaks at TUE, so I need a good union rep. And I know one, Bob Kernahan. He is a genuine hero. He's not here. Bob's not here, but it is because of the crystal moral clarity that Bob acquired as a younger fellow, young Irish Catholic, the sort of moral clarity that I think the nuns at St Joseph's at Rockdale tried to inculcate in me to some, I hope, some success. They used to say very simple things like, a man sins when he does what he knows to be wrong and he does it anyway. And really sin is at the heart, evil sin, like dreadful things are at the heart of what we have to talk about this evening. Could I commence by saying I'm here really because I lost my role at TUE. That's what has led me to being here today. Had I continued in that, I've no doubt that more of this story would have come out more quickly. And I'll get to the nexus between a free and open media and the exposure of malfeasance of this sort during the course of the evening. But I did want to start by saying that there has been quite a deal of commentary about TUE and about the broader Fairfax. And it was brought to my attention in a really heartfelt series of texts this evening from one of the people on air at TUE who said to me, Smithy, look, we're getting hammered here, the good people there at TUE. And I do want to single people out. I just want to single one person out, Jason Morrison at TUE. Yeah. Jason he's feeling it terribly. He sprang to my defence. He spoke the truth at some personal cost to him. I wouldn't speak as kindly of others, and there's no need for me to mention others. But Jason, I did want to single out. And there are some very, very fine people in that organisation who work in engineering and production. And, that's, for those of you who listened, those ads that we used to do, right across Australia. Remember that guy was an engineer who used to do those ads for me. There are some fine people at TUE, and I wouldn't like them all to be tarred with the same brush on the other hand. Apologies. And my mum always said, if you don't have something nice to say, son, don't say anything. So I won't. I want to do speak about four things. Yeah, sort of goes without saying nowadays, doesn't it? Would you check? All right, please check. Right, everybody produce your phone, turn to the person next to you and demonstrate to their satisfaction that your device is off. That's the housekeeping. There are four things I want to talk about this evening, and I'd propose not to use notes, just to speak to you from the heart and from the best of my recollection. And those four things are these. Number one, what happened? What are we talking about here? What is at the heart of the AWU Wilson scandal? The second issue I want to address is, how can somebody so compromised, so clearly compromised and knowingly compromised as Julia Eileen Gillard rise to the position that she currently occupies when so many people in her own movement knew of the facts that compromise her? How can that be? The third point I want to talk about this evening is the ease with which Ms. Gillard was able to close down reportage of an issue that had no bearing on any policy matter. It had no conceivable nexus between it, the issue, and anything to do with the nation's interests or national security, the development of the country. It had nothing to do with any of that. It simply had to do with the most distasteful episode in her past. And I think that third point, the ease with which she was able to completely hose down inquiry and reportage, to enlist the services of many in the media to discredit those who would try to talk about it, that's terribly, terribly disturbing in a genuine democracy. And the fourth thing, if time permits, I would like to talk a little about the role of the blogosphere, of the internet, and how that makes things different, and how important it is, but similarly how potentially problematic it is if half-truths and what have you are being mixed with the truth and peddled around. It in fact does the services of truth a great disservice. So first up to what happened. In about 1991, allow me to provide a little caveat, if you will. I will speak on the basis of things that I know to my own standard of proof to be true. And the source for the bulk of what I have to tell you is various affidavits and exhibits to affidavits that have been filed in various court proceedings. The Western Australian Police Force Fraud Squad investigation into certain allegations against Mr Wilson, Mr Blewett and those who assisted them. And probably now hundreds of hours of interviews that I have conducted with various of the parties who are, well, parties to this matter, including Bruce Wilson, who I speak with probably daily now. And, well, let me just say, I make no bones about the nature of my inquiries, and I point out to him whenever I appear, you know, in the media, my attitude to the crimes that I believe he committed. I speak to him as I would have spoken to any crook when I was a policeman at Collingwood and Port Melbourne. And that is in these terms, that I don't respect the crimes of which you stand accused, but I respect you as a person. And my message to Bruce is this, that henceforth he has two paths which his life may take. One of them involves the potential for a knock at the door at a time not of his choosing, and the prospect of him being extradited to Melbourne and potentially Perth to face the law in those jurisdictions. He lives in coastal New South Wales. He has a 6-month-old. And the very real prospect, should the state's inquiries lead to the framing of charges and a conviction, he faces the very real prospect of significant jail time, because the amounts of money that we're talking about here are in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars. His position was one of authority and responsibility. If it is true, if the matters alleged against him are proven beyond reasonable doubt in a court of competent jurisdiction, he's facing serious jail time. Now that's one path, and he'd have to mount a defence if he chose. The other path for him is to assist the state in its inquiries, to make early and complete admissions, to unburden himself of what he is carrying, and to do so in the belief that he would be likely to attract for himself a significant discount on any punishment that may await him. And in fact, the potential for a suspended jail sentence is within, I'm told, the scope, the range of potential remedies the state might apply to him. What would you do? That's the question that's exercising his mind at present. So I'll leave that. The four things I want to speak about, the first of them was what happened. In 1991, Ms Gillard was an industrial lawyer. Bruce Wilson was a senior official in the Australian Workers' Union. He had been on a joint ticket for his potential position he was seeking to be elected for was as the Secretary of the Union nationally. The other person on that joint ticket with him was a fellow called Bill Ludwig. Bill Ludwig would have been the president. Ludwig and Wilson were very close. Confirmed as late as yesterday to me. They'd stay in hotel rooms together, eat together. Bill, anyone here ever met Bill? He's an old shearer, old Queensland shearer, well into his 70s. Nothing happens in the Labor Party without Bill's imprimatur. It's noteworthy that the boss of the AWU, the Australian Workers' Union, Paul Howes, it was Paul Howes who made the announcement on the night of the long knives when Kev was rolled that Julia was installed. Nothing happens in the Labor Party without Bill's imprimatur. Bruce said to me last night, he said, you know, Smithy, he said, Bill always said to me, he said, mate, if you tie yourself to the shit carter's trailer, don't be surprised when it rolls over and you get a spray. He said, the trick is, don't tie yourself to the shit carter's trailer. And Bruce has gone, geez, I wish I'd listened closer. Bruce Wilson was a mate of Bill Ludwig's. Bill installed Bruce in a number of positions. In 91 he met this industrial lawyer and they fancied each other. You'll draw... I'm sorry. For the mental imagery I have just caused you to endure, I'm sorry. Bruce said to me last night, he said, you know, I've just finished a bottle of wine while I've been talking to you. And Katerina must have heard me say words to that effect because she walked past and said, geez, Bruce, you bloody need it, what you were doing to... We're all human, aren't we? Even crooks. I got on well with some crooks. Chopper Reed was one. He was a funny bloke. Anyway, he met Miss Gillard 91 and they commenced a relationship. Look, I'll talk later about salacious comment and inappropriate comment, and I have a great disdain for it. There is one thing I would say that I think is moderately relevant without verging too far into the personal, and that is that Bruce was a married man with children at home at this time. They commenced their relationship and both of them describe it as a romantic one where they believed that there was a future. It continued for about 4 years or so. He intimated, well not intimated, he stated that he was going to come over to Melbourne, and at about that time he became aware of a very large building project, sort of like a mini Suez Canal in the west in Perth. They were building or re-channeling a river. It's a big thing, a very big project. Significant numbers of workers were to be employed on it, large numbers of AWU workers, and Tees was the contractor. This was in the 1990s, about the time you may recall training guarantee funds, and you could reduce your tax bill if you had money going into certain activities. Tees was aware that it had some of these funds that had to be expended. They were government funds, there's no doubt about that. I think it is relevant to keep in the back of your mind that a senior manager in Tees was Wilson's brother-in-law, married to his sister. That becomes important when the WA Police and the Crown Prosecutor seek a complainant in the end to ultimately sign a complaint and a statement in relation to the ownership of the several $100,000 that we're going to talk about today. In any case, Wilson and his accomplice, Ralph Edwin Blewett, approached the Commissioner for Corporate Affairs in Western Australia and asked him, unsuccessfully, they asked him to incorporate what they claimed was an association that they represented. Now, there's a few legal notions here to familiarise yourself with. When you say incorporate, the corpus, the body, make it into a legal body, a legal entity that can sue and be sued, that can open bank accounts and what have you. The WA Associations Incorporation Act is quite clear and quite specific about the purpose for which the law affords the opportunity for 5 or more people to incorporate an association. The reporting requirements are less burdensome than they are for other sorts of corporate entities. You don't get tied up in paperwork. And it's clearly designed, when you read the Act, it is clearly designed to encourage community good for arts organisations and, kids, sporting clubs and things of that ilk. The Act is crystal clear in what it precludes. For example, a trade union cannot be, it's an explicit exclusion, cannot be incorporated under the provisions of that Act. Similarly, the Act is quite specific in saying this: if your intention is to engage in an activity for pecuniary profit, to trade, to issue invoices, to do work and what have you, then you cannot incorporate under the Associations Act. And it says you must have 5 people. 5 people get together, they become an association, the law will recognise them if there's a minimum of 5 and if they meet the other requirements, and allow them to incorporate, to create a body separate from them. They're members, but it's separate from them. So Wilson, with the avowed intention of setting up an entity separate from the union that could bill TEAS for some of this money, the training guarantee money, Wilson went to the Corporate Affairs Commissioner of his own bat, filed an application, and the Commissioner said, "You're joking. You're kidding." So Wilson's next step was to get on a plane with his accomplice Ralph Edwin Blewett and fly to Melbourne. And there he met with his girlfriend, who was a partner in the practice of industrial law, a partner in a firm in her 30s, whose life work to that point had been the conduct of industrial law, who was well acquainted with the rules of unions, and who became clearly acquainted with the legislation that provides for the incorporation of associations in Western Australia. And I say that because I now have in my possession the application that bears her handwriting to the Corporate Affairs Commissioner in Western Australia. And the objects, she called them, of the sham association that didn't exist, that didn't, for example, have the requisite 5 members, it had 2, Wilson and Blewett. From the very start, it was crystal clear that this enterprise was a sham. It was not what it purported to be. It was something different. I have the police file, and it is crystal clear. In correspondence between the detective McAlpine of the fraud squad in Perth and a judge, his Honour Judge Ron Madgwick of the erstwhile Industrial Relations Court, it's now Fair Work Australia, where the detective sought from the judge exhibits that were produced in 1996 to substantiate the detective's case against these 2 crooks, as he described them. The detective wrote, "Your Honour, no one else in the union knew about this. It was conducted through a private post office box secured by Wilson and Blewett." Now, I infer from that correspondence that had Miss Gillard at that time been truthful in her assertion that she did nothing wrong, she would have sent a bill to the union for her work. And the window envelope would have turned up at accounts payable at the Australian Workers' Union, and they would have gone, "What's this? Bruce, come in." That never happened. It didn't happen. We now know, thanks to the diligent investigation by the firm of the malfeasance alleged against its partner, Miss Gillard, and I'm speaking there of the detailed record of interview conducted by the partner, Nick Stight-Brown, and another as yet publicly unnamed member of the firm's partnership. We now know that Miss Gillard told that investigation that what in fact she was registering was a re-election slush fund. That's what she called it, a slush fund. That's not what she told the WA Corporate Affairs Commissioner. She told him in the certificate that bears her handwriting, she told him something vastly different. I have the two pieces of paper that bear Miss Gillard's handwriting. Keep in mind, Wilson had unsuccessfully tried to register this association. He went to his lawyer girlfriend, who didn't open a file at work, who didn't bill, who exposed her partners to significant potential jeopardy by not opening a file and informing them fully of what she was up to. This form says, it's crystal clear, the association is formed for the purpose of development of changes to work to achieve safe workplaces. The rules of the association, so as to satisfy the Corporate Affairs Commissioner, are required to include a further provision, and the rules of this association did. And that further provision is this, that no part of the property or income of the association may be distributed directly or indirectly to members of the association. If your intention is to conduct trade, to send out invoices, to do work, to employ people, to create a pecuniary profit, it's crystal clear that you would have a proprietary limited company, limited by shares, limited by guarantee, limited by some other form of protection, or you would create a partnership or a trust or a unit trust. There's a range of structures that might better suit themselves if that was your intention. Clearly, it was Wilson's intention. It was Wilson's stated intention that he proposed to send out invoices, and he did. So within months, it struck me as peculiar beyond belief that Miss Gillard would attend a house auction with her boyfriend in Melbourne, that she would see him make the successful bid, that she would then take instructions from him in the purchase of that house, and that her partnership would write to Wilson and his offsider and say, on settlement day, you will need to furnish us a bank cheque in the amount of $67,770 odd bucks. Well, the cheque was forthcoming, but it wasn't a bank cheque. It was a cheque, a copy of which I have in my possession. It was a cheque drawn on that account. It said on the bottom, draw AWU Workplace Reform Association. So when current Commissioner of Fair Work Australia, Ian Cambridge, said, what have I done here? Thank you. Said, I am in his affidavit, he swore, I am unable to understand how Slater and Gordon could have acted for this pair in their purchase of real property, of real estate, knowing the funds were taken from the union, without at the very least recording the union's interest in the property. I can't understand that either. Now, this is an eminent jurist, a man of some distinction, Ian Cambridge, an honourable man, a man who acted at some peril early on to bring to the attention of the Federal Industrial Relations Minister the corruption within his own union. He in fact called for a royal commission into what had gone on in his union, unsuccessfully. He was assisted in drafting the paperwork for that would form the basis of that royal commission by the immediate past Attorney General, another fine man, a sedate and sober, eminently successful Attorney General, Robert McClelland, replaced by, God help us. So within weeks of advising the Corporate Affairs Commissioner that this entity had been established to develop changes to work to achieve safe workplaces, within weeks of drafting the rules, acquainting herself with the legislation, then drafting the rules to meet the requirements on paper of the legislation, and knowing that said you can't distribute the property or income to members, money comes out of it, $90,000 to buy a house for her boyfriend. And if you accept her proposition that she was deceived by a criminal mastermind, why on earth would he go to her firm to have her act in the conveyancing if he was trying to conceal it from her? In fact, I look at it this way. She says that she was the young and naive party deceived by... One of this pair is flipping burgers up the coast, and the other has manoeuvred her position in life. She's the Prime Minister. I mean, who was the the mastermind genius here? That house was purchased in early 1993, and Wilson went on in various union roles throughout 1993, 1994, throughout half of 1995. Now, many of you will know that I interviewed Craig Thompson and elicited from him an admission that he, Thompson, when the bill came in for the brothels, he, Thompson, authorised the payment of those accounts, those credit card accounts, using union money. And just, incidentally, I wrote to the Prime Minister at that time and said, "Ma'am, now knowing of this man's admission that he used funds extracted from the poorest workers amongst us for this purpose, does he retain your confidence?" He's doing a fine job, and I expect him to be around for a long time. I mean, it is disgraceful. I'm embarrassed. I truly am. I am embarrassed beyond my capacity to endure it. I am embarrassed to even say those words. I can't believe we've come to that. I mean, fair dinkum. What the... Honestly, can you believe that? This prick has got his hand in their pocket. And I've been in hospital. I've had a number of operations. I remember the joy of seeing Mum sat on the bus from Sydney when I was in the police. I got a pretty bad injury to my leg, and I'm the eldest of 6. And how old was Ben, Mum? Then he would have been 4. Mum caught the bus down from Sydney with all 5 of the other children. Ben, the littlest, was 4. Sat up on the bus to come down to the police hospital, which was part of St Henry's, I think. Yeah, it is St Henry's in Melbourne. And I used to see those ladies come in to the hospital in their purple dress in the morning. One particular Yugoslav lady always stays in my mind. She talked about she worked for the children, so they go to the university, so they have the good job, not like me. I'm come here, I don't want them to have this like this work, And I can never forget that. I'll never forget that lady and how she'd be up at past 5 in the morning to catch the bus and put her purple dress on and the white shoes, always looked immaculate, and came in and worked in the furnace in the bloody bowels of the hospital. How can that bastard be so up himself that he just thinks that's all right? She paid today's money is $600 a year. The dues in that union are phenomenal in the health service. And I digress, I know, I'm going into Thompson. But it is an insight into the calibre of the person in the office of Prime Minister that she was so immediately able to render like a reference for that bloke. He's a great bloke, he's doing a good job. Ma'am, he's just admitted that he exercised such poor judgment, such an absence of diligence, that he friggin' signed off not once but several times. Anyway, when I go through Thompson's stuff, you'd see ATM withdrawals. And they started off as furtive. They start off as $100 every few days. And then he's put the thing in at the end of the month that gets, well, he was signing it off himself. He's got away with it. Oh, Ripper, how good is this? So the next it's 500. And it turned out it was $500, $800 every few days coming out of the ATM with Thompson. Bruce was the same. Bruce Morton Wilson was the same. Let me give you a little of the calibre of the sort of bloke. He'd write to Ansett if he didn't get 1A on the Perth-Melbourne flight. I'm retarded, I'm big time round here. Got the idea, right? So he used this account clearly as a slush fund because there's thousands coming out of it every few days. 8,000, always under the reportable transactions, under 10, except for one large, $50,000, and the cheque to Slater and Gordon, $67,000. But every few days, the cheques are coming out. You look at the frequency, it's every few days, and you look at the amount, it's thousands of bucks. Those who knew them knew they were living high in Melbourne. He had quite the lifestyle. She was in for it, in with it. Julia Gillard was a part of that lifestyle with him. So through 1993, 1994, and about halfway through 1995, the money was coming out, but he was also finding new people to rip off in Melbourne. So he had this Perth thingo set up. He did a similar thing with Melbourne Water, and then he did a similar thing with other construction companies and other accounts in Melbourne. Timeline is very important here, and I don't have a whiteboard, so I'll just ask you to imagine it. But the Workplace Reform Association, established by her in 92, runs through 93, 94, 95, right? He moves to Melbourne in 93, and there's other accounts in Melbourne. Similar MO. He goes out and sees companies, gets large amounts of money put in, and lots of money comes out in 93, 94, 95. In 95, they have a change of office holders in the union. And the bank goes to the people in the union and says, righto, well, we got your signatories, the new office holders, for your main accounts, but what about Members Welfare Association number 1? What about, and the union's gone, sorry, what about what? That's when it came unstuck. The Melbourne-based accounts, the accounts headquartered at the Commonwealth Bank in Melbourne, were discovered in 1995. There's about $160,000. In fact, there's a cheque made out to a further account that he'd established in Perth to empty out the Melbourne account. I got a copy of it. $160,000 that was frozen. The union got onto him. He's rumbled. I'll stick to the facts. He went away for a weekend, it may have been longer, with Miss Gillard. I wasn't present, so I've only got the foggy, well, thank God I wasn't present. He received certain advice. It's referred to in Cambridge's affidavit, and it's referred to in letters of the time, that Slater and Gordon gave advice to him, Wilson, and that there was another union official, Bob Smith, present, who was advised by John Cain Jr. from Morris Blackburn. As a result of the advice that Wilson received from Slater and Gordon, 160,000 odd, a bit less, in various bank cheques, was made out to the companies from which he had embezzled that money and returned to them by the union. So this is in August of 1995, in respect of the Melbourne accounts. So he sprung. The advice from his lawyer girlfriend is send the money back, and that's going to limit your exposure. He was allowed to leave the union with a redundancy, and that is the last interaction that the Australian Workers' Union had with Bruce Morton Wilson or with his accomplice Ralph Edwin Blewett. What Miss Gillard neglected to do at the time, acting as a lawyer for the Australian Workers' Union, was to advise it of the establishment in 1993 of the Australian Workers' Union Workplace Reform Association Incorporated. I say she had a duty to advise her client of it, particularly in the context of her knowledge that it was being ripped off blind then by Wilson. She knew he was being investigated. Similarly, the house that had been purchased with money from that account could at that time have had some caveat or some order made in respect of it so that it could be dealt with by the union in an effort to recover the union's money, or the rightful owner of the money in an effort for them to recover it. But no such admission was made to the union by Miss Gillard. When the matters were brought to the attention of the partnership, I think, acted diligently to investigate their partner, and Nick Stein Brown and another partner were appointed to conduct what was a quite torrid interview with their wayward partner, Julia Gillard. Keep in mind, these people are practised litigators. Nick Stein Brown in particular was quite a skilled litigator. She was queried about the association. She admitted that it was a re-election slush fund at the time, her knowledge of it at the time. I would not say that if I was not well acquainted with the transcript and the existence of the tape that discloses that knowledge of hers. So I cannot, for the life of me, understand how a halfway competent media could accept at face value her protestation, I did nothing wrong. Ma'am, you manifestly have done several things clearly wrong, if wrong is the word that you choose to exercise or to describe your judgment over your own conduct. I would say criminal. I believe that there is criminal misconduct disclosed in the behaviour that you have exhibited, and at the Police Academy I was always taught that fraud matters are investigated on the paperwork, and the paperwork in this matter is clear and compelling. Your handwriting, ma'am, is on the false instrument that induced the Corporate Affairs Commissioner in Western Australia to incorporate a sham that didn't exist. It was a fiction. It was used to defraud Tees of several hundred thousands of dollars. That's on the income side. The money that came into it was then taken out by your boyfriend to sustain a lifestyle and to purchase real property. How in God's name you can just say I did nothing wrong, and how you can have a complicit media hold that up as an article of faith and as sufficient proof in and of itself of the absence of a story here just defies belief. So I think as beyond Julia Gillard having a case to answer for neglecting to bring to the attention of the union the existence of this association when her boyfriend got rumbled, I think as well Andrew Gretsch, the current Managing Director of Slater & Gordon, has to provide further and better particulars in relation to the firm's actions when the firm was appraised of the existence of this incorporated association by their partner. Did the firm advise the union? Clearly not. If it contends that it did, its advice was ineffective. It didn't go to the right person because the union didn't become aware of Workplace Reform Association Incorporated until about April the following year. Cambridge wrote his affidavit in September of 1996. In the intervening period, Bill Ludwig did a couple of interesting things. And the first of those was that Bill Ludwig, you with me who Bill is? Big Bill, the shearing boss. Bill went to the Industrial Relations Court, to His Honour Judge Madgwick, and said, Your Honour, an invalidity has occurred in the management of the union. The invalidity is this, that in August of 1995, the following sums of money, and he enumerates them, were returned to the following companies, Leighton's, Tees, etc. That is a result of an invalidity in the management of the union. That money should never have been returned. It is the property of the union. And we seek, Your Honour, by consent, orders that money be returned from Tees, from Leighton's, etc., back to the AWU. And he got it. He got that order. By consent. None of those organisations... Look, you keep in mind the environment of the time. They didn't want to have union dramas, problems with the union. They sent the money back. The union got to keep the money. In doing so, Bill has endorsed the notion that money was not improperly obtained, that it was the property of the union. All right, Bill, if that's your logic, how then do you explain the absence of any effort by the union to pursue Wilson for the hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash that he took off with, or the house? You can't have it both ways. Do you see the contention between those two ideas of Ludwig's? It is Bill Ludwig who has responsibility for the stewardship of the union, and Bill Ludwig who ultimately needs to explain why it is the case that no efforts have been made. There was no proceeding to get an order against Mr Wilson for the house or for the hundreds of thousands of dollars. What there was a report from the union's joint secretaries in the West, in Western Australia, and it was a result of Ian Cambridge's efforts in uncovering Wilson's malfeasance. And those two people are Trebleco and Daly. Mr Trebleco and Mr Daly went to the Western Australian Police and alerted the police to Wilson's activities with this Workplace Reform Association. That led to about 500 pages of police file being produced. A lay-down misere. You can read it, you can tell in the way, I know the way coppers write. McAlpine, the detective, calls this pair the crooks. The crooks did this, then they did that, and the crooks did this, and I'll need this and the other. And the lawyers agreed with him. Ultimately, that led them to one Joe Trio, brother-in-law of Wilson, who at an incredible meeting said to the police, you know what, I just don't think we've been defrauded here. That is the reason that the police investigation in the West ground to a halt. Now, there is a Brisbane connection with Joe Trio. There is a Brisbane connection with Bill and his lawyer Con Shaka. And I have no data to take any further the line of inquiry that clearly is opened by the fact of Joe Trio, Bruce Wilson's brother-in-law, being the man who said to police, my company Tees has not been defrauded. But I would suggest to you that it is a question of great moment and one which ought to be pursued by the appropriate mechanism, and in my view that would be a Royal Commission, into the whole of this damn story, so that we better understand precisely went on, who did what and when, and who knew what and when, which brings me to point 2. That's what happened. Let's put that to one side. Julia Gillard was interviewed on the 11th of September in 1995 and she was asked to resign. She walked from the union. I have in my bag 4 documents in which she describes her work history. Now, there's always been a 6-month period which is difficult for her to account for, and that is the time from September in 95 until 3 May in 96 when she commenced work for John Brumby, the opposition leader in Victoria. She's had various attempts at describing what went on in this period. In my view, none of them convincing and some of them directly contradictory. Over the weekend, Andrew Gretsch, at her behest, the Managing Director of Slater and Gordon, released a version which says this, that she left the firm on 11 September 1995 on a leave of absence, which I'd never heard before, to campaign for a Senate seat. And look, you may not be familiar with the arcane method by which the major parties select Senate ticket spots, but I can't recall anybody campaigning publicly for the number 3 or the number 4. I want the number 3 position on the Labor Party seat, and I've got my placards and I'm handing out at shopping centres. You don't do that. I mean, the parties know what seats, what positions are winnable. They're determined on a percentage of the vote and a quota, and it's generally 12-ish odd percent, depending on the state. And you can say with reasonable accuracy who is going to get in on the Senate ticket. You don't leave work, paid employment, as a partner in a law firm to go and campaign thus. That's what this said on the weekend, and she remained doing that on this leave of absence until Brumby, Jane Kerner, got her the job with Brumby in May. The 4 documents to which I refer, the Parliamentary Handbook, the National Archives of Australia and its information, quick facts about Prime Ministers, her parliamentary biography, and a detailed article in the Law Society of Victoria, all predate this current disclosure, which happened over the weekend after her run-in with Paul Kelly, and all of them say this, that she started with John Brumby in 1995.
Since when?
Well, and her biographer, Jacqueline Kent, has had difficulty with this period as well. It really draws attention, ma'am, rather than deflects attention, because you're not straight with us. You're not telling us really what happened. What happened? Nick Stein-Brown in the newspaper says you were asked to resign at that time, and you did. Your resignation was accepted, and that you were asked to resign because of your conduct in this matter. It was an embarrassment to the firm. I can't lie about this. I am compelled to tell you, I have heard Peter Gordon, the former managing director of this firm, say in his own words, I sacked her. Yeah. I have heard him say it.
Wow. I believe it.
Well, I've heard him say it. I can't imagine why he would have cause to mislead the person. I was in the company of another person. He addressed the remark to that other person, but I heard it. I couldn't help but hear it. And I can't imagine why he would have cause to mislead anybody. He's not spoken publicly about it. But the point is this. There are many in the Labor movement who are well and truly aware of the circumstances of this AWU Wilson matter. And prominent amongst them are the following people. Bob Kernahan's protege, Bill Shorten. Bill Shorten commenced working with Bob Kernahan in 1992. Shorten was engaged in producing what the union charmingly calls a shit sheet against Bruce Wilson. And Shorten knows a good deal of the detail of this matter. But there are plenty more. The AWU itself, its leadership, the heirs and successors of the people who ran the show at that time know what went on. How can it be that with such a clear skeleton in the closet, somebody is able to manoeuvre themselves into the position so compromised? It wouldn't happen in the security services, it wouldn't happen in the military, it wouldn't happen in the police. If you have those compromising facts in your background, they must be dealt with and opened and aired so that you are not in a position where undue or improper influence can be brought to bear on you under the threat of disclosure. It's always been most disquieting for me that this system, Kernahan calls it a stinking, rotten snake's pit. This marvellous group of people, look, Katerina will tell you, I bore her witless with this, but I've exhaustively examined the history of my family's involvement in the First World War and the way those fellas looked after each other. And they would describe themselves as genuine labour men. Blokes who'd carry the other bloke's pack. And if your feet were buggered, you'd be looked after, somebody else would take care of you, and that is the sort of intention that the fellas had at Barcaldine when they got together, the shearers, to create what was a magnificent movement. My father was in the Australian Amalgamated Metal Workers Union. He was a tremendously proud member of that, of his craft. Dad would bring tears to my eyes talking about at Everleigh at the railway workshops. Dad worked there for 40 years as a tradesman. And when a tradesman would leave, when Dad started in 1954 on steam engines and Westinghouse brakes, they would stand shoulder to shoulder either side of the track with a long-handled steel implement, tapping the track as this proud man with his Globite bag would walk down with tears streaming down his face. And they were genuine labour men, people who had regard for each other and for their families, and they cared. My happiest memories, Mum will tell you this. Mum, do you remember down at Coogee, the work picnic? When we'd go to the work picnic and they'd have the green canvas Peters and Paul's ice cream bags with dry ice in them, and Dad would collect the tickets and we'd get a ride on the train. The pony rides, yeah, carbon dioxide. That's my memories of the proud, the proud Labor Party, the proud Labor movement, people who cared for each other. Not these arseholes like Conroy and Shorten and people who would... That is not what it is about. It has been infected by a malaise that has nothing to do with advancing the interests of working people. No clearer example of that than Thompson and the speed with which he sprang to his defence, and no clearer example of it than the AWU and the members being ripped off here and the Prime Minister's own complicity in that action. So I pose to you the question, how in God's name can we sit idly by knowing of deficiencies in our system that would allow somebody so grossly compromised to be put into that position of Prime Minister without this matter having been adequately addressed, without us knowing the complete nature of it? I go now to the third point that I said I would speak with you about, and I know I'm horribly over time, and it's this. When I spoke, I loved my job on the radio. I just passionately loved it. It was the greatest thing I have ever done in my life, and I've done a lot. I got the attention span of a gnat, you know. I looked at the Thompson matter, his protestations of innocence, and they just seemed bloody absurd. So I went to Sandy Dawson, the barrister who appeared for the Fairfax Company in the defamation proceedings, and Paul Sphelins, the solicitor who prepared the affidavit material, etc., and said to them, what's the go here? I've seen Thompson sent an email to his parliamentary colleagues that says, I sued Fairfax for defamation, I settled, there's nothing to it. And they showed me the exhibits to the extent that they were able. I was a part of the company, and it's crystal clear he was bull-tishing. It was just crap. So I would say on the radio, this bloke has a case to answer, and he's a liar, and he's a thief. And I knew that that was horribly defamatory of Craig Thompson, but it was true. It was defensible on the basis of the imputations being factual, true, and presented in the public interest. I believed that to be the case. I believe it to be the case with Miss Gillard too. And I have retained senior counsel, a QC, to provide me with guidance in what I can say, and the country's preeminent expert in defamation law, I believe him to be, that Bruce Burke. I speak with Bruce regularly. But I take responsibility for what I say, not them. I take responsibility for what I am publishing tonight, and I'm aware that cameras are here. I'm also aware that these are weighty allegations against the Prime Minister, but I do not resile from them in any way at all. I believe that they're true. Look, is anybody in a race to get away, or shall I tell you? I'll tell you exactly what happened, and you will draw your own conclusions. Katerina is worried because I have a deed of settlement between me and my erstwhile employer, and I was paid before I would resign. And I haven't worked now for 12 months, and I would expect my young wife to be worried, and that's reasonable. That's part of the pressure these bastards apply to try to buy silence. So I would ask that you understand I will be completely respectful of the deed of settlement I entered into freely to get paid out, because I didn't want to walk away, without providing for my family. And I will be completely just factual. I have an obligation not to disparage Fairfax, so I won't disparage Fairfax. They're wonderful. On a Friday afternoon, look, this has been building for some time. After Craig Thompson, a lot of Labor people started to confide in me. And the matter of the AWU scandal was brought to my attention. I started to go back and forth with the defamation lawyer about it. Clearly, it had that dimension to it, that character to it. He said, look, whatever has been said in a parliament, you're safe to say. So I said a fair bit that had been in the Victorian Parliament's Hansard. And on a Friday afternoon, the fact that the former president of the union, Bob Kernahan, would be able to speak was brought to my attention. I finished work at 3 on that Friday arvo, and I phoned him and gained his confidence and thought, this is a competitive world. I wanted the interview, and I thought I'll do it now. It's always been my instinct. Do it, get it in the can. If people are ready to talk, now is the time. So that Friday evening, I interviewed Bob, and it went for about half an hour or so. And I sent it to Bruce Burke, the interview, on the internet, as you can easily do nowadays. And Bruce rang me up and said, you're joking. He said, no way, that is not going to air. I said, righto, Bruce, well, let's just go through it. You tell me why. And Bruce said, okay, well, the imputation here, you will need this, that and the other to substantiate it. You'll need documentary evidence to satisfy me that the facts the propositions you are presenting as fact are true. So I made an exhaustive list of what Bruce required, and on the Saturday morning I rang Bob and said, mate, and in fact on the Saturday morning I rang Bob and said, mate, I can't run with that interview. I'm going to need a hell of a lot more. It's going to take time, and there's a lot of detail I'll need. And Bob said, what? And I told him, and he said, yeah, no worries, I got it. I said, I did. I said that. I said, how have you got it? That just didn't ring true. And he said, no, I'm a respondent in the legal proceedings. I've been served with everything. I've got everything. All the documents, I've been served with them. I said, shit. Well, how can you get them up to me? You're down in Shep. I'm in Sydney. And he said, oh, Marlene runs a sandwich shop. She's got a scanner and the email. So true. He did. He set him up on, he's gone in and done the scan and it took a long time, but I got them all. Got all the docos, had a look at it, and you know, you develop a sense, I suppose, of what has the ring of truth about it. And I had spoken with enough people to establish for myself that this bloke's provenance, you know. Never had I haven't spoken to anybody before or since who has questioned his credibility. You get a little bit of the ad hominem, oh, he's an old pisshead, he's a dickhead, you know what I mean. I'm sorry to be vulgar about that, but that's what people say who try to assail him. That's as close as I have ever heard anybody ever have anything negative to say in relation to Bob Kernahan. He is a genuine man who bears the scars that you would expect to see on somebody who has been so pilloried and poorly treated by his own side, who has been turned on by professionals, by really vicious, vindictive, dreadful, dreadful people. Watch your back, I would say, if you propose to engage in a similar course of conduct as has Bob Kernahan. Bob sent this stuff up to me. I rang up Bruce on the Saturday and said, mate, you're not going to believe this. Here's what I got. Bruce said, righto, well, go again. So I recorded a second interview with Bob on the Saturday and sent it to Bruce Burke, the external defamation lawyer. And then I called my boss in of the radio, the program director of the radio station, and he and I sat in my office while we played it. Bruce had it at home. He'd listened to it. We played it together. We both had notebooks. Bruce gave me guidance in relation to the normal sort of guidance that I would have ordinarily taken for a matter of this importance. I'm no dill. I knew precisely how important this was, and I think I acted in a prudent, appropriate, careful fashion to ensure the truth of what I proposed then to broadcast. My boss agreed. I won't embarrass him by giving you his name, but he then caused the creation of what a radio station would call promos. You know, things that say, coming up on Monday, the interview that will rock your socks. So it ran through the weekend. I do not have the authority, the means, the expertise. I wouldn't know where to start. What button do you press to make a... Where's the voice man? Where's Balls who comes and goes, coming up on Monday? I wouldn't have his phone number. I'm sorry to give you his nickname. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yes, that's right. It's always on air, isn't it? So the promos went to air. I was asked to go on the breakfast show on the Monday, and I did. About 8:15, I went on the Sunrise show. About 8:30, I think, a senior News Limited person phoned me and said, what have you got in this interview? And I said, well, here's what he says. And he said, what do you want to back it up? And I told him. He said, shit, I wish we had that. I said, why? He said, she's been on the phone to Hardo and Chris Mitchell, the editor of the Australian... Gillard, yeah. And I won't say who phoned me, but a senior person. And she's gone ballistic. She's threatening the nuclear option. I said, what's that? She said, carving us up. Bob Brown getting stuck in, like they are in the UK, over the News of the World phone message hacking scandal. And I said, why? She said, Milne's column, she wants it pulled. I said, well, what's in it? What's wrong with it? What's unfactual? She won't say. Right, so what does she want? She wants us to pull it. She wants an apology. And she wants a guarantee we'll never talk about the issue again. And I said, well, you're not gonna. What's inaccurate? What does she want you to change? No, you don't understand, mate. She wants the whole thing pulled and she wants an apology. And I said, well, you're not going to do it. You're a News Corp. I didn't say you're a News Corp, but I said, you're not going to do it, are you? I'd known this bloke for years. Long before I even contemplated going into the radio, I knew him from business. And he said, mate, Hardo's thinking about it. And I could not believe when I saw on my computer screen, the Australian apologises unreservedly for a column that was carried earlier today that contained assertions about the conduct of the Prime Minister. The Australian acknowledges that these assertions are untrue and apologises unreservedly to the Prime Minister and to our readers. When I saw that, she had extracted... I beg your pardon?
Could that be a reason
Why Hartigan is not there now, I don't know. It could be. But you keep this in mind. That woman had extracted from News Limited that concession, not through any open means, not through a letter, not through lawyers, not through the pointing out of an inaccuracy, but through a threat, through menaces over the telephone. And I would remind you of the provisions of the Crimes Act in respect of using a carriage service to harass or intimidate. I could not believe that I was witnessing a proud organisation with a reputation for fearless pursuit of genuine stories that News Limited had. It fell to pieces.
Unbelievable.
And I just could not believe what I saw. But I had worse in store. When you present 3 hours of radio every day, the preparation for it is intense, and Katerina can attest to that. And I don't know how many hours have been stolen from you, darling. And, you know, but you map out what you're going to say, and it is an involved process, and you have a fairly reasonable idea of what's going to come at what time during the show. 10 to 12 is not a good time to tap me on the shoulder if my show goes to air at 12. But at 10 to 12, I got told I have to go down the boss's office, which is down the stairs. And I'm in reasonable shape, but if you tell me I've got to walk up and down those stairs just before I go on the air, hello, it's Michael Smith. It's really good to see you. I'm really... So I said, what for? I had the biggest interview I had ever recorded, and I got told it's not going to air. Why? Because it's not going to air. Well, why? I'm not disparaging Fairfax in any way. I was dismayed. That happened for a week. That, it's getting checked, it'll be tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. On the Thursday, we recorded another interview with Mr. Kernahan that was sunshine, lollipops and happiness and rainbows, in which everybody was great. And it was impossible to draw any defamatory imputation from it, and it too suffered the same fate. And for the sake of my settlement with Fairfax, I'm sure Fairfax exercised diligent judgment in that. And I seek not to disparage Fairfax.
So when it comes out that you're right, are you able to go back to UE?
I don't know. I don't know. The more right I am, the more people who put me off have to admit they were wrong, and it's human nature. So look, that went on that argy-bargy for a week. Ultimately, I was suspended formally on grounds that were brought to the attention of the Federal Magistrates Court, and that was in an action in which I consider myself to have been wholly successful. And I received there was a circumstance in which I resigned. And the agreed statement between me and Fairfax is that I resigned over, quote, editorial differences. And the editorial difference is in the AWU story. I had been told I had editorial independence as long as I stuck within the laws of defamation and the broadcasting code, and I will report to you, I have never once been sued, in fact, successfully or otherwise, for defamation, never once. I have had several complaints made to the Broadcasting and Communications and Media Authority, none of them successful, none of them upheld, some zealously pursued by various interest groups, but never once have I been had a complaint upheld against me. I always felt that I conducted myself properly on air, fairly, gave right of reply, and whenever I presented material of a controversial nature, I enlisted outside help, as I did in this instance. It was galling beyond words to me to see this genuine story, which at its heart had a decent man, Kernahan, telling a story that he was precluded from telling because of the covert actions, not up front, no legal letter, nothing to refer to, nothing with a signature to the name, but plenty of behind the scenes. It's disgraceful. It is disgraceful to me and beyond the pale that so many in the media have accepted at face value her protestation, well, I did nothing wrong, I've got nothing to say. Well, I can tell you, as a day one, week one constable, if I went back to the boss of the shift at Collingwood Police Station and said, oh, you know that knocked off car, the fingerprints, you weren't able to arrest that bloke? I went, I got my handcuffs out and he said, I've never done it. Oh shit, sorry mate, he never did it. He did nothing wrong. Oh really, Smithy? Fuck, we better, shit, I'll get on the fingerprints. They buggered that up somehow. How could that be? I mean, seriously. How could that be?
Those two interviews with Mr. Kernahan, are you allowed to put them on the net? Or was that part of the...
No, they are owned by the radio station. They were produced, you know, I'd use their resources, they own them. So the answer is no, I don't own them. But Bob and I could do it again.